Essentially. I haven't normally been involved in the announcements around when room releases are made.
But something this significant should have come from the ministers, though, shouldn't it?
Look, this is a relatively operational matter. It's a delay for a period of time while we figure out exactly what's going to happen at the border. As soon as we're able to give people more certainty around when the next room release will be, we will certainly do that.
What does this mean for shutting the border if you're not releasing more rooms?
At the moment, we have to recognise that the MIQ is very full. We're dealing with far more positive cases at the border every day now than what we typically have. So we've got a system that has generally operated with 2 or 3 positive cases at the border. It's now operating at between 40 and 50 positive cases per day at the border. That's meaning that we're having to convert a lot more rooms into quarantine facilities, and that is putting that system under quite a lot of strain. So, and there's still, we've still got decisions to make about the end of February date and whether there's be any further change to that. And so releasing rooms for March and April, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about rooms for March and April, not January and February. Those rooms are out and have been released. We've just put a pause on that for a period of time.
So realistically, when a New Zealander is going to be able to book a spot back to their home?
Look, we'll provide certainty to people as quickly as we can. I acknowledge that people want to know when they're going to book, but of course people also want to know whether they're going to need to book as well. So for people in Australia, they're going to want to know when can they come in and self-isolate, and similarly from around the world. I think there's a lot of people who would prefer to isolate at home and prefer to have the certainty of when they're going to do that rather than have to book through MIQ. So we've got to finalise those decisions. We'll be working as quickly as we can to do that.
What is the current? It was accidentally apparently put up on the MB website. It was hastily taken down and then followed by a tweet. Wasn't this a massive stuff up?
No, not at all. MB have always put out information about when room releases are going to be, whether there have been changes to room release availability and so on. MB have always made those announcements.
So who made the decision?
When was the actual decision made to delay the room release?
Yesterday.
When did you lay out? Were you part of
Well,
that?
no, I made the decision. I made it yesterday.
What does this mean for the plan to gradually reopen the borders? What's the status of that plan? Should people forget the April and February dates that were previously announced?
At this point, there's no change to the end of February date that we put out there previously. It is something that we will be considering, but at this point, there isn't. We've made no decision to change that date. The rooms that we're talking about, the further room release that was going to take place, is for rooms in March and April, and I think people would prefer some certainty before we did that room release anyway.
So the plan for New Zealanders overseas to come back and isolate at home in February and I think the end of April, that still stands?
There's no question we are moving to a self-isolation model. The question of exactly when that happens and the sequence of when that happens has changed. It changed before Christmas, and we've been looking very, very closely at that. We obviously want to give New Zealanders time to get their boosters. We want to keep Omicron out of the community, which we've been successful at doing over the summer break. It's meant New Zealanders have been able to have a summer holidays, but we acknowledge that we will be moving to a self-isolation model. The question of exactly what the date is, that's the question before us at the moment.
So the dates that were pushed back before Christmas, they are up for review. They could change again.
Well, at the moment, those are still the dates. We have not made decisions to change those.
But they could.
Look, everything can change, but at the moment, those are still the dates that we have.
Can you say how, if at all, this affects the group exceptions process, especially for Feb?
We have had a look at some of those group bookings. So there's 2 different things you could be talking about. You could be talking about the class exceptions for the border, which is people who can apply for visas and then book a space in MIQ. And then there's group allocations, which are people coming in either because their employer needs a group or for whatever other reasons, some sports teams, etc. We've had a good look at the group bookings to see whether we can trim anything more back from those, just to make sure that we're maximising the space that we have available given the pressure that we've got on MIQ. I haven't had the full report of that yet. That's underway at the moment.
We know that cabinets.
Omicron is battering at our borders. Where's the plan for when an outbreak hits New Zealand?
We've been discussing that over the summer break. A lot of planning work has gone into how we will deal with Omicron when it does make it into the New Zealand community. So those plans are well advanced, and Cabinet will be talking about those today.
And so when can we expect a decision or?
I'll go clear and then come back
How
to you.
many cases, such as you've got the MIQ worker in Auckland and now the airport worker, how many cases does it take before you consider the Omicron is there and take everyone back to red?
At the moment, those cases are contained. So, look, as you know, I've never said never, and I've never set hard and fast rules around these things, because you have to deal with every day as it comes.
When can we expect an announcement about when the government will reveal its plan?
In terms of the any changes around the framework, the community protection framework, we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. We're obviously talking about that at Cabinet today, but we will make further announcements on that. In terms of the work at the border, there's still work happening there, and we'll keep that under review, and we'll be working to give people certainty as quickly as we can.
So how tangibly different do you expect it to be from what it is now if Omicron is in the community?
As I've said, the arrangements at the border, our plan is to move to self-isolation. That's exactly what we're working towards. We want to provide people more certainty around exact dates of when that's going to be operationalised. In terms of any changes to the protection framework, I don't want to get ahead of the Cabinet discussions on that, so that's something that we'll talk about at Cabinet.
Sectors and industry are desperate for a clear plan now of what happens when there's an outbreak, when people are having to en masse isolate. Has the government just been asleep on holiday?
Oh, absolutely not. Over the last few weeks, actually, while most New Zealanders have been on holiday, we have been out there, or our teams have been working very hard to get plans in place around how to deal with Omicron in the community. And that includes working with some of our largest employers who have the potential to face disruption to their businesses. It includes working with business representatives. It includes working with community organisations. So all of that work has still been going on over the summer break.
When will they see the minutiae of this plan?
As soon as we can. We're obviously, we've got a lot to work through. We've been doing that over the summer break, and we'll continue to do that.
Do you want the plan to be outlined before Omicron gets in the community? The Prime Minister says it's a matter of when, not if.
There's no question that Omicron will make it into the New Zealand community, so people do need to be prepared for that. The best thing people can do to prepare for that is to make sure that they've had their booster shots, to get take up the opportunity for childhood vaccinations. We will be working hard to do that, and it's great to see the number of parents who have already taken up that option. We'll provide more detail and more certainty as quickly as we can.
Are you endeavouring to have it out before it's in the community?
To the isolation requirements, just given some of the labour shortages that we've seen overseas?
Again, we'll work to try and provide some more certainty around that. We've looked really closely overseas at how they've managed the self-isolation requirements for people who have COVID-19 and people who have been exposed to COVID-19. And it has varied from country to country, and it's varied depending on situations. So in some critical workplaces, for example, where everybody has had COVID-19, they've made the decision to exclude the people who haven't rather than the people who have in order to keep those workplaces functioning. So at this point, there's a lot to work through. That is what the planning is all about. I'm not saying what we will or won't do, with any certainty here, because we've got to work our way through that.
When Omicron does arrive in the community...
You talk about giving people certainty. At the same time, you say we can't have any hard and fast rules. And there was certainty that you were going to, sort of certainty you were going to stick to the border date of January. That then changed. You can't give anyone coming into New Zealand any certainty at all, can you?
Look, I think that's probably a fair question, in the sense that we're working very hard to provide certainty in an uncertain environment, and we're still dealing with a virus that's very unpredictable. But we acknowledge that the border restrictions in particular have a very significant impact on people who have been waiting a long time to find out what's happening, and we'll work as hard as we can to give them answers as quickly as we can.
When's the best time for Omicron to come into New Zealand, given the seasonal nature? It's going to come. When's the best time?
Look, we'll be having conversations about that over the next few days.
Scheduled arrival for the virus then?
I wouldn't preempt that. I'm not going to announce that today, but nice try.
The Black Caps have had to cancel their tour of Australia, and New Zealand cricket says it's a lack of flexibility from the government on MIQ was a factor. What's your response to that?
Look, I acknowledge that restrictions at the border have had a significant impact on a whole lot of New Zealanders, including sports teams, including businesses, including individual families, and we're working as quickly as we can to try and get to a situation where that disruption will be minimised a lot more than it has been.
Why was nothing done to help New Zealand cricket with their tour?
We have worked extensively with New Zealand cricket.
Were they one of the group exceptions that was scrapped?
We've worked extensively with New Zealand cricket. The Minister for Sport would be the person to ask about how the sport allocation for MIQ has been divvied up.
When Omicron does arrive in the community, does that put an end to anybody going into the green variant or the green traffic light setting?
I think it's Let's see. That's a conversation. We'll be having a conversation about the protection framework at Cabinet this afternoon. I don't want to get ahead of that. So I won't
Can you
preempt
rule
that.
out green for any region?
What was that?
Can you rule out a green session tomorrow for any region?
I'm certainly not going to rule anything in or out until I've had a chance to talk to my Cabinet colleagues about that.
When Omicron does eventually arrive and say we see case numbers like they're seeing in Australia, will there be any point in MIQ and keeping that?
Look, that's quite a complex question. I think there's a question of whether we still have MIQ, and I think we're likely to have MIQ for quite some time. Whether we have MIQ for everybody is a different question to that, and I think it is likely that a significant number of people will be able to isolate at home rather than through MIQ, but I think we'll still need MIQ for some time yet.
Why would we still need it?
You'll need MIQ for people who haven't been vaccinated, for people who can't otherwise isolate, for a variety of reasons. We'll still have MIQ, and of course we'll still have quarantine as well. We'll still need a good quarantine capacity.
There's currently a MIQ facility being decommissioned in Wellington. Is this the right time, given that we probably need that capacity?
The particular facility in question is a very small one. It only has a small number of rooms. It hasn't been a particularly integral part of our MIQ network in the sense that it's been relatively underutilised for two reasons. One is the appropriateness of that facility for isolation and quarantine purposes in terms of air ventilation and all those other things, but also just logistics. Getting people to and from Wellington in a small number to make the best use of that facility has proven to be difficult. When we made that decision at the same time as opening up an additional facility in Christchurch, which is actually a bigger facility. So it was swapping out a small facility for a bigger one.
Can you give us a sense of your broad strategic thinking? If we think that Omicron basically peaks and then dies, is it best to let it peak and die quickly, or to have a slower process?
Look, it's still early days. We're still following the international evidence on that, so I don't want to get ahead of that.